everybody, and welcome back to Jaffa Cooks, and today I'll show you how to cook lamb shank. It's one of the most toughest pieces of meat, but given some TLC and a couple of hours, it turns out to be one of the most tenderest pieces of meat with some tomato sauce, a few herbs, voila. And I'll show you how to turn this into an absolute beautiful dish. Now, I've taken a lamb shank. It was frozen. I've thawed it out. It was a nice piece. If I look at it, there's enough piece of meat on there to cook and feed probably 6 people. You could serve it with polenta. Mashed potato is a great option. Goes down good with the kids, with some vegetables on the side. And if your kids really like pasta, a really good time to mix this in with some pasta, and it comes out with a really nice sauce by the end of the cooking time. All right, so I'm just quickly going to wash my hands, and then I'll get down to prepping this piece of meat, and then I'll show you how to proceed from there. All right, see you in a minute. Before we start, I'm going to basically dust my lamb shank off with some flour, and we're then going to seal the meat. And before we go over to the stove, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do so. I really do like listening and hearing about all the different recipes that people have been trying and what the outcomes were. Many thanks to all those who've DM'd me, and especially those who've sent a couple of requests in. I will get down to them, but I just need a bit of time. All right, so let's get down to cooking. So I'm just going to take some flour. I'm going to lightly dust my my lamb shank, and I'm doing this just for a couple of reasons actually. One is I want to seal the actual lamb shank, and the flour. Not that we should really. The flour also acts as a light thickener as well. So as we put the tomato and the stock in, it should start thickening up very, very slowly, because this is a slow roast, slow shank. So I'm just going to wash my hands again, and I'll see you back at the hob, and we'll start putting all this together. All right. Okay, so welcome back. Just going to pop some olive oil. So before I start popping my lamb shank into the pot, there are 2 steps to this process. One is we're going to seal off the lamb shank first, and then we'll take that out of the pan, and then we'll do the stock and the vegetables, and then we'll combine it together, put it on the back of the hob, and let it simmer away for about a couple of hours. So here goes. Here's my shank, and I'm just going to let it sit a couple of minutes, let it sizzle away. And we don't want to cook the lamb shank itself. All we want to do is basically just seal the sides off. My pot may look small, but that's because I want it to be within a confined space. I don't want there to be too much liquid. So the proportion I've kept it is within a small pan itself, because this is going to sit on the back and simmer away. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat down slightly, and I'm going to remove the shank. So you'll still find that if your pan is smoking, that's fine. That's the additional fat that's left in there. And now there's no need to remove that fat. We want to keep it in there. So now I'm just going to pop in the onions, and this is basically all the vegetables. There's the onions that I put in there. I've got carrots, a celery stick, and I'm just going to, on a medium heat, just saute them off. Do turn down the temperature if your pan is getting too hot. I'm popping my garlic. And my salt and pepper. Give it a quick mix. And what we're trying to do is just heat up and seal off the vegetables and the onions. For my herbs, I'm using rosemary and thyme. And thyme is a great herb, and we do use a lot of it in our house. If you're using fresh, a teaspoon, but if you're using dried, you need to use slightly less because it is quite strong. I've got some homemade chicken stock. If you haven't got homemade, then by all means use anything out of a packet, or if you've got a stock cube, that's good as well. So I'm just going to bring this to a boil. To give the shank some taste, apart from the herbs and stock, we're now also going to pop in, I've got a tin of tomatoes. You can use fresh tomatoes. I'd recommend tin, and that's because they're going to, we may need to put in maybe a little bit more tin tomato. It just depends on the lamb shank itself, but I think 1 tin should be suffice. It's the amount of liquid that we need to keep constant in there. We don't need it to dry out. So the liquid, the tin tomatoes come with additional liquid, so it's easier just to use a can of tin tomato. So now the water and stock is coming up to a boil, and I'm just going to pop my shank in there in a minute. Okay, so now that the tomato and the stock and everything are started to boil quite nicely, I'm going to pop in the shank and position it nicely. Now I've got some boiling water as well. I'm just going to pour a bit more water in there. So this is now going to sit on the back burner for the next 2.5 hours minimum. And the reason why I'm saying 2.5 hours, I'm going to put my alarm on for 2 hours, then come back after about, actually no, I'm going to put an alarm on for an hour, and then I'm going to come back and just check the water level. After 2 hours, I'll probably see that the meat is simmering away and probably coming away from the lamb shank bone itself. And after probably 3 hours, it'll probably be ready enough to serve. So I'll see you back in about an hour just to chop up the water. 2.5 hours to make sure that, just to check that the shank is away from the bone, and then probably 3 hours be ready to serve. So I'll see you later. Okay, welcome back everybody. And my shank is done. It's been cooking away for about 2.5, 3 hours. And let's have a look at it. Oh, I'm not even sure if it's going to survive without falling apart in the pot. Whoa. All those juices coming out. And some of the pieces have just literally broken off. It's so juicy. And what I'm going to do now is, there are many different ways you can serve the shank. You could really just shred it off, that I'm going to do now. And your shank should literally do this. It's just falling apart. And you could serve this with mashed potato. You can serve it with tagliatelle. Really, you could just even eat it on its own with some ciabatta bread, or some just a nice piece of wholemeal bread. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shred this down to the last piece, and then I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to serve it with mashed potato, and then I'm also going to serve it with tagliatelle. So I'll see you back in a few minutes once I've shredded this. Okay, so I've deboned my shank, and what I'm going to do now is, just to give it that extra bit of flavour, I'm going to take the rest of the meat, pop it into the sauce, and then cook it down for another half an hour. And once it comes out, that ragu, it'll just be a nice thick sauce with some beautifully soft shank meat. I'll see you in a few minutes.